FIDE Candidates 2022 round number 8 has come to a conclusion. I'm National Master Matt Jensen. We're going to look at the odds going into today's games, recap the 4 games, and then talk about the odds after today's round. So let's start with the odds going into today's game. See Nepomniachtchi way up here, +4, close to 60%. Caruana in second, about 25%. Nakamura is down here, right around 8 or 9%. So today's game, we had some excitement. Fabiano Caruana had the white pieces with this +2 score against Nepomniachtchi with the +4 score. That means if Fabiano were to win this game, Fabiano would be tied with Nepomniachtchi with a +3 score for both of them. This is going to be a crazy exciting game. So let's see what happened. We have the Petrov defense, and keep an eye on the clocks. The clocks will tell us how well prepared the players are. Right now, we're sitting at an hour and 59 minutes each, so we know the players are still in their book theory. And Caruana plays this kind of sharp line with pawn to c4. We've seen this before in the tournament. Rook e1, queen b3. So look what Fabi's doing. Every piece is applying some pressure to black's pieces. This is a very aggressive way to play against the Petrov. And this is exciting because when I see this, I start to think, okay, Fabiano is playing for a win here. Fabi wants to tie the results after this round. Queen d7 played. Knight h4. So again, playing for the initiative, making black retreat. And Nepomniachtchi is starting to use a little bit of time here. He's down to an hour and 49. Queen to c2, putting pressure on this knight. And now after c takes d, we see Nepo is down to an hour and 30 minutes. Fabi still has an hour and 56, completely in prep. And this position looks symmetric, but there's an issue for black. The bishop on e6 is actually boxed in by the d pawn and the f pawn. This could become a positional problem for Nepomniachtchi. Now f3 is played by Caruana, and all of a sudden this position gets very tricky. If you look at the eval, it's saying 0.00, but the move that Nepomniachtchi has to find to hold equality is bishop to e7. This is not an easy move to see, and he starts burning a lot of time. So look, he's at an hour and 29 minutes. He goes down to an hour and 12 minutes to find bishop to e7. We're only on move 16, so this is starting to put Jan in a little bit of time pressure. Fabi finds the top move, g3, and now we see a mistake by Nepomniachtchi. The best move here is bishop to f6, allowing f takes e, and this is just getting a little bit crazy. Let's look at it. Bishop f6, f takes e, attacks this bishop. The best move is to grab the knight on a6. Now there's bishop takes d4, checking the king. After bishop e3, trade those bishops. Now take back on a6. If you look at the material here, it's +1 for Caruana. We have 2 knights for a bishop and 2 pawns. But the 2 pawns are connected passers in the middle. This gives a lot of winning chances for both sides. We got this massive imbalance on the board. This would have been a fun position to see. I don't know if Nepomniachtchi looked at this move, bishop to f6, but he opted to play knight to d6. And maybe he just was okay playing for a draw and playing solid, feeling that he can hold this position. But now we see an advantage for Fabiano, close to 0.9 advantage. Queen to a4, offering the queen trade. Queen takes a4 is not a great idea because positionally, like we talked about, that bishop is so bad on e6. And this knight is kind of eyeing these queenside pawns. There's bishop takes a6 chances. That's very close to winning for white. It's a +2 advantage if Jan goes for the queen trade. So he plays bishop to f6. Now Fabi finds a great move. Queen takes d7, going for the queen trade himself. So it's not quite as good as that +2 position, but he's +1.6 here. And Fabi's in the driver's seat. Knight takes d5. He's playing for a win, trying to tie Jan Nepomniachtchi with a +3 score. So these pawns trade in the center. Rook c to e8. Now, if we look at the imbalances, this is still a big deal. That bishop on d7 blocked in by the pawn on f5. That's a weakness. Also, it opens up this king on the opposite diagonal. So every time you push a pawn in front of your king, that can expose the king. The king on g2, even though these pawns are up, it's actually sitting there pretty comfortable, kind of tucked away behind the pawns. There's no easy way for black to attack the white king. Good move by Fabi, bishop to f4, playing for the initiative. And now a really strong move. This is a great move according to chess.com, knight to e7 check. He could take this knight, but this bishop is being attacked. He could trade the rooks first. He decides, I'm going to start with knight to e7 check. This is a good way to play for the win. There's only one good move for Nepomniachtchi. It's king to f7, and he does find it. So if we look at the clocks, Fabi has been spending quite a bit of his time now. We're down to about 40 minutes for each player. Fabi is trying hard to squeeze for the win here. This position is very complicated. Look at all the pieces that are hanging on the board right now. This knight is about to get captured. Bishop's about to get captured. This knight is hanging. This pawn is triple attacked. How do you find the best move here? There's only one move here that gives an advantage for white. It's very difficult to see. It's bishop back to f1. And I don't blame Fabi for missing this. And the idea is if rook takes e7, we can play bishop takes d6, skewering the rook. So that forces the rook trade. So this position, that bishop on f1 is ready to come back into the game, check in the king. And the black king is in a little bit of trouble. If rook e8, rook to d1 can be played, lining up with both bishops. This is a +3 position according to Stockfish, so this is definitely winning territory for white. Instead, Fabi plays bishop takes f5. The problem with this move is this encourages a lot of trades, and in the end, there's no light square bishop for white able to attack the black king. So the light square bishop comes off, a bunch of trades occur, and now we get to this position. Bishop takes b2 played, and you can already sense that white has lost quite a bit of the initiative. There is rook down to the 7th, but the bishop guards g7, and this knight is ready to trade off. Jan just won this pawn back, so the material is equal. Bishop to e3, Jan takes another pawn. That's a good move. And now we're getting into one of these super grandmaster. Let's trade everything down. We can see Fabi starts to play defensively, and I'm going to go fast through this endgame. Both players are playing solid moves. Eval's just saying 0.00. They know it's a draw. They hit move 40, repetition. So Jan stays at +4. Fabi stays at +2. All right, this next game, Alireza Firouzja versus Richard Rapport. This is an exciting one. We have Alireza with the white pieces, and we see another Berlin declined. It's kind of the theme of this tournament. Players are still in book theory. We're looking at an hour and 50 minutes each. And starting right here, Alireza starts to press for an advantage. So knight to c4 played, attacking the bishop. The best move is to retreat. Rapport plays bishop to g4. So now we're seeing like a half a pawn advantage for Alireza. He finds the best move, queen e1. Bishop to c5. Again, bishop to c7 a little bit better. So we're seeing some small slip-ups by Rapport, and he is using quite a bit of time. He's down to an hour and 13 minutes. King to h1 by Alireza. Now pawn to a5. This is an inaccuracy according to chess.com. b5 would be the best move. Maybe a5 later, allowing that bishop to come back here. But a5 right away, the computer is not in love with this. f4 played, and now all of a sudden we can see that this king on e8 needs to find a home. Rapport's a very aggressive player. Sometimes he likes to avoid castling, but in this case, that king is running into some danger. All these pieces are on the board still. The only thing that's traded off is one minor piece for each side. Rapport's king needs to get to safety. Again, he plays aggressively. Pawn to a4. Now pawn to b5. And at this point, Firouzja opens up the center. And here he finds a brilliant chess.com move, knight takes e5. It looks like the knight should just retreat. The queen guards e5. But he had this calculated out. Knight takes, queen takes, pawn to d4. And not only is this just a 2 or 3 move tactic where you say, okay, I'm going to sack a piece for a pawn, fork another piece with the pawn, will be equality after the trades. Material stays the same. This is stronger than that because the best move is queen to h5. So the best move for black is not the natural bishop takes d4. Bishop takes d4 was played. C takes D, queen takes D. This is now a 1.5 advantage for Firouzja. The issue, though, in this position is he has to find bishop to D2 to hold that advantage. And the idea is after queen takes B2, rook to C1, that bishop can eventually head to C3, getting on this really long diagonal, and this bishop could always retreat back. So he has to sack the B2 pawn, get the bishop ready to come to C3. Instead, he sacks the pawn with the bishop on E3, and at this point, the position goes back to equality. If we look at the material, Rapport is +2, but his king is still in the center. Firouzja has the bishop pair, and there's an advanced E pawn that could help with the attack. This is going to be an exciting one. Can Firouzja get a big enough attack to prove compensation for the 2 pawns of material that Rapport is up? Queen F2, looking at bishop to D4 type ideas. Bishop E6, bishop to D4, queen B4, bishop to C5. So now we see that bishop preventing castling for black. This is going to get spicy. Still have queens on the board, 2 rooks, 2 bishops for white, and no castling for black. Rook A to C1, lining up a discovered attack. And we're still at a 0.0 eval. Players are holding equality. We're at move 24, 32 minutes each. So they're looking at about a minute and a half per move to reach move 40. Bishop back to B1. Good move, hitting the queen. And now queen to H4. So we see some aggression by Firouzja. Keep in mind that black king still cannot castle. And at this point, we see a blunder. Bishop to C4. Chess.com notes this as a blunder. The best moves are all pushing pawns in front of the king. H6, H5, or G5. But after bishop to C4, rook to F5 played, the rook attacks the queen. Where is this queen going to go? There's only one good square for her. Almost everything is covered. Queen to G3 is ready to be played, attacking this pawn. This king is still stranded in the middle. Rapport finds the best move, though. Queen to B2. And now rook to E1 is the best reply, but this position's getting a little bit crazy. The players are low on time, 23 to 17 minutes. Rook to G1 was played. This is a blunder. Rook to D2 is the best reply with a 0.6 advantage for Firouzja. Bishop to E6 played though. So again, very tactical position. It's hard to play precise. Obviously the engine is super strong at high depths. A blunder back by Rapport. At this point, it looks like white should move the rook, right? The rook's attacked. There's one move here that holds an advantage for white, and it's a +3, and it's a brilliant chess.com move again. Queen to G3, played by Firouzja. Look at this move, allowing the capture on F5. After E takes F though, this king is stranded in the middle with the rook coming to the E file. Both bishops are ready to play, the queen's well placed. Black is completely busted here with a +7 advantage for white. So he cannot take on F5. He plays knight to D7. And here there's only one move again, and it's another chess.com brilliant move. Bishop to D6 by Firouzja. What a move. The idea is the bishop was being captured. It needs to stay on this diagonal to prevent castling, and you don't want to allow a pawn to C5. So again, you offer up the material by playing bishop to D6. Queen D4, and now we see a retreat of the rook, and pawn to E5. This secures the bishop on D6, opens up this bishop, and we still have rook and queen coming down the F and G files. Queen G4, Firouzja says no thanks. He needs the queens on the board because the material count is still +2 for Rapport. So Rapport's going for some counterplay. Firouzja shuts it down nicely. Gets this light square bishop active. So that's one thing to note. You want to keep improving your worst piece. That bishop needed some improvement. It comes out here, nicely pressures the pawn on C6. And Rapport here plays F6. There really isn't much to do. It's the second best move, but you can just sense this is opening up these light squares too much. Bishop takes C6, good move. We see why F6 was played, trying to connect the rooks, get to safety. If Rapport had the chance, he'd probably love to play rook E8 and king G8. Another queen trade offer, it's declined. Knight takes E5, bishop to E2, hitting the queen. And now bishop takes E5. The F pawn is pinned. So at this point, Firouzja is now up a bishop. There's no way Rapport can win it back. And Rapport resigns. So this puts Rapport back down to an equal score. This puts Firouzja at a -1 score. Um, First win of the tournament, but he played a brilliant game. He had 3 chess.com brilliant moves. There was only one little slip up in the middle where he lost his advantage for a bit, but really he was always fighting. He had the initiative for the 2 pawns the whole way. Going into the third game, this is a big one. We have Radjabov with the white pieces, Hikaru with the black pieces. Can Hikaru get a win and pull back close to the leaders? We see a Berlin declined. No surprise. This is an opening where Hikaru is known as an expert, and you know he wants to try to beat Radjabov. Radjabov has actually never beat Hikaru in a classical game going into this game. So this is kind of funny. We see a4, knight a7, attack the bishop. Bishop retreats, the knight goes right back. This is deep stuff by Hikaru. It's kind of inviting a repetition. So all this is pretty standard. Hikaru, though, just starts to spend a little bit of time. I think he's trying to press for an advantage with the black pieces. Radjabov, though, looking very comfortable on the clock. 152. Now we see the first kind of imbalance offer after bishop takes c6. B takes c could be played, but it drops the a pawn. So all of a sudden, this is getting a little bit complicated for black. You don't want to lose the a pawn unless you get good compensation. But Hikaru does give it up. So at this point, the eval is plus 0.68. So that means Radjabov has the extra pawn, but Hikaru has about 1/3 of a pawn worth of compensation. Queen to e6, best move on the board. And at this point, Hikaru misses the best move, which is actually bishop takes f2. And after queen takes, take the knight. I think the reason Hikaru didn't play this is that feels like a 2-result game where black cannot win. It's either going to be a draw or a white win, most likely. Hikaru wants to play for the win, so he's keeping this bishop on the board. Knight to h5, looking to infiltrate. Pawn to b4. Radjabov is saying, all right, I got this extra pawn. It's a passed pawn. I'm going to start pushing on the queen side. That's going to be my long-term play, and that's how I'm going to play for the win. So I think both players at this point are still looking to play for the win. King to h8 by Hikaru, potentially planning some expansion on the king side, which he is known to do. That could be a way for him to create an attack. King to h1, great move according to chess.com. Sidestepping, preparing rook g1. I kind of like these double pawns for white. The white king got off the diagonal of the bishop. The rook hits g7. The bishop hits h6. I feel like white's position is pretty good here. Pawn to f5. Very aggressive move by Hikaru. A mistake according to chess.com. Rook f to d8 is the strongest move, trying to play down the d file and just keeping this structure solid. This is a very double-edged move. E takes f5 is the best reply. Radjabov was a bit afraid to play it, and I understand why. He doesn't want to see rook takes f5, rook f8, but that's the precise way to play it. Rook to g2, f takes e, queen takes e, rook f6, preparing to bring the other rook over next. So now we see this trade of bishops, and at this point the eval is 2.6. I think Hikaru is shifting gears. I was looking at some of the live stream video. Hikaru looked really rejected at this point. His clock has 13 minutes, Radjabov has 24 minutes, and they have 16 moves to make until time control. So Hikaru is probably playing for the draw now. He offers the queen trade, and he knows queen takes, c takes. He probably has the skills to hold a draw, or at least a pretty good chance of a draw. Hikaru is the endgame expert in this event, I believe. He's shown it time after time. He can hold losing endgames. He can win winning endgames. He wants the queen trade here. He thinks he can hold the draw. Queen g4 played, queen takes f3. Now the queens do come off. We have a +1 advantage for Radjabov. Material is currently equal. This pawn is pretty weak though. Can Radjabov fight for the win? This is a huge move. Hikaru plays c takes b. Blunder. At this point it was a +1. He needs to find knight to f6 and bring the knight to e4. Centralize that knight, attack the c pawn, try to cause some problems around the white king. Instead, he simplifies the queen side. This makes things a little bit easier for white. And now these pawns are going to start rolling. Where's the counterplay coming from for black? Black's extra kingside pawn, not doing anything currently. Rook f6 played. And now we see Radjabov start to go to work. He's just pushing. Queenside pawn, queenside pawn, queenside pawn. Just push them all up the board. Gets that pawn all the way up to a7. Now we see an 8-point advantage for Radjabov. And he's in the driver's seat. And he pretty comfortably goes on to win this. En passant, stacks the rooks on the A file, puts his knight on a good square. All he has to do is get that rook off of A8. There we go, knight to B6, resignation by Hikaru. After knight takes, rook takes, king C7, rook B7, king takes pawn, rook to B8, forces that rook off of the back rank. This doesn't help because take, make a queen, and Radjabov wins. So poor Hikaru, I really wanted him to win. It's hard to be unbiased. I want him to get back into the leaders spots. He would have been +2 if he won this game, but now he's back to equal. The last game we have is Jan-Christoph Duda against Ding Liren. Ding Liren has the white pieces in this one. Let me do a quick refresh. Okay, the game is still going. I'm actually recording this before the game ends, but we have +8 advantage for Ding. So this starts off with an English, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Not a lot of excitement happens until later on when we get closer to the end game. So right here, imbalance, material is completely equal. Both bishops on the long diagonal. See a queen trade, and now here's the first pawn structure imbalance. We have double pawns. Position is still like dead even. See a few trades here. Pawn to E4. Another rook trade. This is all equal still. Until this moment, we see a brilliant move. Knight takes A5. That's pretty cool. Utilizing the back rank tactic. G6 has to be played. And now knight to C4. Because of that brilliant move, knight takes A5, even though the engine is saying 0.1 advantage for white, there is this potential pass pawn on the queen side. If Ding is able to push that A pawn up the board and trade off the B pawns, that A pawn could be enough to play for the win. Rook to C2 played, and now we see B4 supporting the A pawn. Knight takes B6, so now it's a 2 versus none on the queen side. Duda should be in a hurry to get one of those pawns back, which he does do. There's still the extra A pawn. This is something to note in your own games. Whenever you have a pass pawn, always push it when you have the opportunity. Pass pawns create a lot of problems for the opponent, even Super GM level. Just keep pushing that pass pawn as long as you can safely do so. Rook A3, he guards the pawn. And at no point does Ding ever really give Duda a chance to win this pawn back safely. Like here, there's this huge issue with the F7 pawn. Then the pawn goes to A6, where it's defended by the bishop. Double defense by Ding. Trades off the knight. So now we get this equal material endgame, but the pass pawn is the biggest factor. All white has to do is trade off the bishops. I'm saying all. It's going to take a little bit of time. But if he can trade off the bishops, play rook to the 8th check, make a queen, then it's winning for Ding. So there's a lot of maneuvering that's going on here, but that's what Ding is going for. And look at this king. The king is marching all the way over to the queen side, trying to deflect the rook. This is just a matter of time before Ding converts. We're at move 55, but we're looking at a 7-point advantage. I'm very confident that Ding is going to win. I made that assumption going into the odds, but if they're wrong, I will correct it before the next game's at the start of the next game's video. So let's see the odds now after today's round, assuming that Ding wins. We now have Jan Nepomniachtchi way off in the lead. He's actually at 66.5%. So about a 2/3 chance that Jan wins this event. And that's a +4 score. Caruana now drops down to below 20%. He's 18%. And Nakamura also drops down with his loss. He's down to 2%. And the other players are all below 2%. See Rapport, Firouzja, Ding Liren, Radjabov -1 scores, Duda with a -3. All of these players are very close to 0% chance to win. That's going to be very difficult. If one of these can go on like a 4 or 5 game winning streak, then maybe they can get back. Otherwise, they need Jan to lose a whole bunch of games in a row. So that's the odds after today's round. I will see you guys in the next recap. Thank you for watching.